During the Vietnam War, Americans encountered an unexpected and very unpleasant surprise. A large number of Vietnamese traps. Due to the natural features of the terrain, dense jungles, numerous rivers and swamps, and a poorly developed road network, Americans could not fully utilize ground transportation and were forced to rely heavily on helicopters for troop movement. However, in the deep jungles of Vietnam, American troops had no choice but to travel and fight on foot. It is also worth noting that Vietnam experiences a rainy season when tropical rains persist for several months, flooding vast areas. In such specific conditions, where even few dirt roads become impassable mud and the use of aviation is problematic, technical superiority is to some extent negated, and Vietnamese traps become highly effective and deadly. In this video, I will tell you about the most brutal and widespread traps. The famous Punji trap was often installed on forest trails near American bases and was difficult to detect as it was camouflaged with a thin layer of grass, leaves, soil, or water. The size of the trap was precisely calculated to fit the size of a boot. The stakes were always smeared with feces, dead animals' blood, and other unpleasant substances. Stepping on such a trap would result in the stakes piercing the sole of the boot and causing a wound that almost certainly led to blood infection. Bamboo trap was installed in the doors of rural houses. As soon as the door was opened, a small log with sharp stakes flew out of the opening. Often, traps were installed in such a way that the blow fell on the head. With a successful activation, this led to severe injuries, often with a fatal outcome. Sometimes, such traps, but already in the form of a large log with stakes and a triggering mechanism using a stretch, were installed on trails in the jungle. Whip trap was often installed on jungle trails. For this, the bamboo trunk was bent with long stakes at the ends and connected through a block with a stretch. As soon as the wire or fishing line, which the Vietnamese often used, was touched, the released bamboo trunk with stakes hit the area from the knees to the abdomen of the person who triggered it with all its force. Naturally, all traps were carefully camouflaged. Big Punji, an enlarged version of Punji. This trap inflicted much more serious wounds. Here, the leg was pierced up to the thigh, including the groin area, often with irreversible injuries to the main male organ. The stakes were also smeared with something unpleasant. One of the scariest big Punji traps had a rotating lid. The lid was attached to a bamboo trunk and rotated freely, always returning to a strictly horizontal position. Stepping on the lid platform, the victim fell into a deep pit, 3 meters or more, with stakes. The lid rotated 180 degrees and the trap was ready for the next victim. Bucket trap. A bucket with stakes, often with large fishing hooks, was buried in the ground and camouflaged. The horror of this trap was that the stakes were firmly attached to the bucket at a downward angle, and once caught in such a trap, it was impossible to pull the leg out. Attempting to do so only drove the stakes deeper into the leg. Side closing trap. 2 boards with stakes were fastened together with elastic rubber, stretched, and thin bamboo sticks were inserted between them. Once someone fell into such a trap, breaking the sticks, the panels would close at the level of the victim's abdomen. Additional stakes could also be buried at the bottom of the pit. Spikeboard trap. These traps were usually installed in shallow bodies of water, swamps, and puddles. Once the pressure plate was stepped on, the other end of the board with stakes would hit the person with force. A successful activation often led to death. Pineapple, grenades, explosive shells, and other ammunition hung on tree branches. To activate them, one had to touch the branches. One of the most common traps during the Vietnam War was installed on or near the ground. The situation was exacerbated by the fact that in the forest litter of the jungle, it was very difficult to notice the trap, especially in the heat and 100% humidity, which did not contribute to concentration. It is worth noting that the North Vietnamese showed amazing resilience, determination, and fearlessness during this war. They skillfully used their modest resources, as well as the natural and climatic conditions of their homeland, inflicting the maximum possible damage on the enemy.